Hey guys, before we get started with today's video, I'd like you guys to go over and check out my buddy BJ's channel, Hilltop Knives and Gear. He's almost at 1,000 subscribers, and I know that he's going to be doing a 1,000 subscriber giveaway. So head on over there if you're not already subscribed to him and get him up to 1,000 subs. He only needs 28 more. If you like my stuff, you're going to like what he does. He does a lot of knife modding. I know he did edge retention tests in the past. I'm not sure if that's something he's continuing to do, but he's got some awesome content here. He uploads a lot more often than I do, and he puts out some really good videos. So go on over and check him out and give him a sub. So let's get into the video. What's going on, YouTube? It's Tom here. We're back with another video today. We're going to be doing another in-depth video on a steel that I've been wanting to try for a long time, and that is ZDP-189. This was actually sent to me by a subscriber way back in like October, so I've been testing this off and on since October-ish. This one has taken a long time. I got new knives in the process. I wanted to carry new knives, and so it delayed this one a little bit. He's been awesome about it, so thank you for letting me continue to test this knife, probably for the better part of 8 months now. With having it for that long, I have tested it quite a bit on different edges, so we'll get into that. I was super excited to get the opportunity to test some ZDP. It's a steel that you hear about a lot, or at least used to, but it's kind of been overshadowed by some of the newer steels in more recent years. You know, with like Maximate and Rex 45 and all that good stuff coming out, you don't really hear too much of ZDP, especially now that they're doing the K390 runs of all these same knives in Japan. I'm not sure you're going to hear too much from ZDP in the future. It's a pretty unique steel, and I don't know. I think it has its place in the market, as we'll get into here in a little bit. It's not really a steel that you see in folding knives very often. The only time I've ever seen it in folding knives is from Spyderco, like we have here, and then Rockstead. You know, two different ends of the spectrum. Spyderco coming in pretty affordable at around $120 and up or so, and then you got Rockstead, which you're talking like $800 minimum. But where you typically see ZDP used is in high-end kitchen cutlery. So it's kind of cool that this steel is available to us from Spyderco in a folding knife like this Stretch 2 here. The composition of ZDP is actually super interesting as well. You got 3% carbon, which is insanely high. Probably, I think that's the highest carbon I've ever seen in a steel, especially in a knife steel. 20% chromium, which is also extremely high. That ties the M390 family for the most chromium I've ever seen. 1.4% moly, and then less than 1% of tungsten, vanadium, manganese, and silicon. Something to note here, this is all chromium carbide. There's no vanadium carbides, there's no tungsten carbides. It's all chromium carbide, which is a little bit softer than what vanadium carbide is. So the cool thing about that is you can use almost any sharpening stone to sharpen ZDP, which is really, really cool. So you can use anything from diamond all the way down to like traditional water stones, Arkansas stones, all that stuff, which is awesome. The extremely high carbon that they added to this aids in some high attainable hardness. I've seen like Rockstead runs this like 67, 68. So we're talking Maximate numbers as far as hardness goes. Spyderco tends to run it considerably softer, from what I've seen, like 64, somewhere around there. And you're still getting good performance from it at that hardness. We'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to the edge retention, but just think about what this steel could do 4 points harder when we get to the edge retention numbers. Seeing 20% chromium in a steel, you automatically assume that it's stainless, but ZDP is not completely stainless. It's probably similar to D2 as far as its stain resistance. You know, it's stainless kind of in the right sense, but not completely. With that much carbon in this steel and that much chromium, a lot of that chromium pairs up with carbon to create an abundance of chromium carbides. And there's very little free chromium left to aid in corrosion resistance. So you get a steel that's not quite corrosion resistant. Hitachi actually classifies this as a stainless steel, but if you actually go to knifesteelnerds.com, Laren did an experiment on these, or on ZDP, and found that it was not stainless based on his testing. So speaking about that, let's talk about corrosion resistance a little bit. In my experience, so this was actually left in my car overnight a few times over the winter. So it'd be kind of cold at night, obviously, and then it would warm up a little bit during the day, and it would cause some condensation to form on the blade a little bit. I did notice some small spots of discoloration right here along the plunge, but those have since gone away through use. So it wasn't really a big deal, but it did show some corrosion. Let's talk about sharpening a little bit. It sharpens like any other high hardness steel. It kind of feels a little bit hard on the stones. It takes some time to sharpen if you're removing any damage like a chip. And this is a steel that's a little bit more keen to chipping because of all the chromium carbide in there and high hardness. Anything over 1,000 grit or so, and it tends to lose its aggressiveness in the edge. It just gets kind of smooth. So if you're cutting things like zip ties, I wouldn't take the edge over 1,000 grit. Once I got over that point, it felt like it just wanted to slip off of the zip ties. It didn't bite into them. Still sharp. It would still like cut into paper and stuff, but on harder materials like zip ties, it just wouldn't bite and it would just slide off. And because of I'm not sure why this is. I don't know how fine of a grain steel this is. I haven't seen any of the micrographs or anything for it. But the edge comes up super fine and sticky sharp. So no complaints there as far as the edge that comes up. So over this past 8 months or so, I've put a decent amount of use on this knife and a couple of sharpenings, obviously. I tested out different grit finishes to see which one ZDP preferred. So on the first sharpening, it came to me with a pretty large chip out towards the tip here. Probably about, I'd say, half the height of the bevel. So took some definite work to get rid of that. I reprofiled it to 18 degrees per side and then sharpened it 200 through 1600 grit ceramic on my wicked edge, and then 16 and 4 micron CBN on leather. The edge that came up was really, really nice. And then the total use off of that edge was 123 feet of cardboard, opened 60 small boxes, 23 medium boxes, 14 large boxes, and cut 2 pallet straps. Now when I was cutting those pallet straps is another time when I noticed that this edge just kind of wanted to slip off of those because it was there was no tooth left to it when I took it to that 1600 grit ceramic. So definitely wasn't my favorite edge there for what I use it for. On the second sharpening, still 18 degrees per side. I only took it to 600 grit. I went polar opposite of what I did the first time. Stropped on 16 and 4 micron on CBN on leather. 191 feet of cardboard, 13 small boxes, 5 medium boxes, 7 large boxes, and opened 15 knife boxes. When I say open knife boxes, I mean like the Benchmade knife boxes that have like the one piece of tape. Not hard use by any means, but it's something to be noted. I felt like this did a little bit less on that second edge, even though it did have a better bite to it, had more tooth to it. I don't know, just didn't feel like it performed quite as well. So on the third sharpening, I took it to 1,000 grit. That's just strictly diamond. 16 and 4 micron CBN on leather yet again. And this one cut 253 feet of cardboard, 19 small boxes, 7 medium boxes, and 26 large boxes. So I would have to say that was probably its best edge or best performing sharpening progression so far. I did try and run it on a 1000 6000 combo Waterstone. It was just one of like the cheap King ones off of Amazon. Edge that came up on it was okay. I think that was more due to me than anything else. I did get like 200 feet of cardboard off of that. I'm not putting it here in the video because I felt like that edge wasn't properly deburred, and I don't know, I just don't want to put a result in here that I don't think is 100% accurate. So I went ahead and edge retention tested this. Obviously that's what we do here every time we do an in-depth video. 18 degrees per side, 200 to 1000 grit diamond, 16 and 4 micron CBN on leather. That's the normal progression we do for any knife on here, but it also happens to be the best performing one from our testing in use. So off of that, it did 254 feet. So that's in a 1-inch section. The last edge that we did in use, that 253 feet with all the boxes and stuff, that's all across a whole edge. This is just on a 1-inch section. It's technically on its 5th edge, but that chip that was initially removed that took up roughly 50% of the bevel would probably account for 2 or 3 sharpenings. So I'm going to probably call this safely 7 sharpenings on this knife, so I don't think it's going to get much better than what it's at right now, which is a bit disappointing compared to some of the other results, like Gerald's over at Outpost 76. He was getting results roughly 100 feet more or so than that. So it's a bit disappointing. Still a good steel overall, still performing pretty dang good compared to most other steels, but I just figured it would cut a little bit more. Maybe this one's a little bit softer. Maybe it got overheated in grinding. I could continue to keep going and cutting, but I've removed a decent amount of steel from this knife, and I've had it for a long time, so I just want to obviously get it back to its owner and not remove too much more steel. I don't think that we're going to get too much better, honestly. As far as edge stability goes, so I went ahead and tested that on the zip ties. It cut all 10 zip ties and the edge held up just fine. I'm starting to think that the zip tie test isn't a good test of edge stability. I might have to do some sort of edge stability testing here in the future. If you guys have any ideas for that, let me know. But it seems like pretty much every knife can cut through 10 zip ties and be just fine, no matter what it is. HCR did fine on the last one. ZDP did fine, which is a steel that's notably chippy. I don't know. I just don't think it's a good test. So if you guys have any ideas, let me know down in the comments. Impact toughness, I decided not to test this on impact toughness since it already had that one chip in it from when I got it. And then I also saw some results prior to this that would lead me to believe that it's not too great on the impact toughness. So sometimes when I'm sharpening on my wicked edge and you're making those up and down strokes across the edge here, the stone slips up and over top, and then you end up banging the stone back down into the edge if you get moving a little bit too fast. I did that when sharpening for the edge retention test, and it actually took a pretty good gouge out of the edge. Obviously not nearly what the first one was, but it did take more damage than any other steel I've accidentally done that to, and it took me another 15 minutes or so to remove all the damage that caused. So I'm not going to test it on impact toughness just based on that, because I don't want to have to remove any more steel than what I already did. Plus, I feel like I've already seen what its impact toughness is going to be like. It's not a great steel when you're talking about impact toughness or even lateral toughness in the lateral sense. So coming to a conclusion here about ZDP after some pretty extended use with it, I think it's a good steel overall with above average edge retention compared to some of the other steels on the market. Still performing better than a lot of like the M390 stuff that's out there at probably a much lower cost, honestly. You're talking about the Spyderco models. The edge retention should be a little bit higher on most knives than what you saw from this one. Like I said, Gerald was getting results 100 feet or so better than what mine was. Personally, I prefer a lot of other tool steels over this. M4. I'd take Crewwear over this. Obviously, Maximet, Rex 45, 4V, those kind of things. I'd take those over ZDP. But ZDP is a great option for someone wanting to get into the super steel market, but they have limited sharpening equipment. If that sounds like something that would fit you well, I highly recommend that you try a knife in ZDP as your first entry into the super steel world. Really good steel overall, and I think most people will be happy with it for their day-to-day use. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to drop a like down below and subscribe to continue to see more in-depth videos on steel like this. I have a lot of fun making these in-depth videos, and you get to kind of learn the characteristics of the steel through use. So there will be more to come. So hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you guys are notified when I'm posting. And as always, guys, thanks so much for watching. Have a great day.